Right now, 20,000 civilian sailors are trapped in the Persian Gulf and nobody is coming to rescue them. A foreign government is charging Bitcoin tolls on international waters and threatening to bomb ships that refuse to pay. The U.S. government says the Strait of Hormuz is open, but the live shipping data shows something completely different. What you are watching right now is the largest maritime piracy operation in recorded modern history, full stop. The only real difference between this and the pirates of the 1800s is that Iran accepts Bitcoin instead of gold coins. Nobody in Washington or the mainstream media is calling it piracy, and that framing gap is costing us critical time. Today we are covering the Pentagon briefing, the Iranian toll booth, and the live marine traffic numbers in sequence. By the end, you will understand what is happening, why it hits your wallet directly, and what must change now. Here is the number that should be dominating every front page in America this morning: 138. That is how many ships normally pass through the Strait of Hormuz every single day under standard operating conditions. On April 5th, the day after the ceasefire announcement, exactly 8 ships made it through the entire strait all day. 8 ships out of 138, that is a 94% blockade, not an open strait. If someone blocked 94% of American highway traffic tomorrow, we would call that an occupation, not a diplomatic breakthrough. Yet here we are calling it a ceasefire while watching Iran collect Bitcoin payments from the ships that actually get through. That is the story. And we are going to unpack exactly how we got here and what it actually means. Defense Secretary Hegseth held a morning briefing and delivered what I can only describe as a masterclass in selective framing. He said the Iranian military has been devastated and no longer has the capability to effectively defend the strait at all. He also said Iran is voluntarily letting ships through, that commerce will flow, and that ships will be sailing again soon. I want to address this carefully because the logic problem embedded in that statement is significant and the stakes are high. Iran does not need a powerful navy to lock down every commercial ship in the Strait of Hormuz. All you need is 2 drones and the credible willingness to use them against completely unarmed merchant vessels. A fully loaded supertanker carrying 2 million barrels of oil cannot defend itself against a single incoming drone attack. Picture yourself as that captain. You are essentially steering a floating bomb through a corridor patrolled by an armed adversary. You are not moving until someone hands you a written, verified, and enforced guarantee of absolute safe passage through that strait. The Red Sea already taught us this exact lesson, and it appears we are learning it again the expensive way. The Houthis have not attacked a single commercial ship in the Red Sea since September of last year's 0 attacks. Yet Red Sea shipping traffic is still well below pre-2023 levels because fear does not expire when the shooting stops. Fear is the actual weapon being deployed here, and it is extraordinarily cheap to create and remarkably expensive to undo. Secretary Hegseth also repeated the administration's favorite talking point, that America barely depends on Persian Gulf oil at all. This line is technically defensible and strategically misleading, which makes it exactly the kind of statement worth dissecting carefully. The EIA shows the United States imported 246 million barrels from the Persian Gulf in 2025, that is 120 supertanker loads. 8.5% of all U.S. oil imports. And that is before we discuss what happens to the global price. Oil is not priced locally, it trades on a single global exchange, meaning a shortage anywhere raises prices everywhere simultaneously. When Persian Gulf supply disappears, Europe and Asia bid up alternative sources, and that price increase ripples directly to your gas pump. Your gas prices, heating bill, and grocery costs all go up whether your personal barrel of oil came from the Gulf or not. Saying America is insulated from Hormuz because we import little from there ignores how global commodity markets actually work in practice. Now let us get to the part that makes the piracy comparison not just useful, but genuinely impossible to argue against. Iran has constructed a formal toll collection system on an international waterway that it does not legally own or control. Every tanker wanting to pass must first email Iranian authorities a full cargo manifest and await their official assessment response. Iran then calculates a fee of $1 per barrel of oil and issues the captain a formal digital invoice. The vessel has seconds to pay that invoice in Bitcoin before the window closes and the military threat becomes active. Bitcoin was deliberately chosen because it cannot be frozen. traced, or confiscated by U.S. Treasury Department sanctions enforcement teams. Any ship attempting to transit without completing this process received a radio broadcast warning of imminent military strikes against it. Let me pause and make sure we are applying the correct legal and historical label to what is being described here. Panama charges a canal toll because Panama built, maintains, and staffs the entire canal with real services and real infrastructure. The Suez Canal Authority charges fees because Egypt provides pilots, convoy management, emergency services, and navigational support to every vessel. What Iran is doing is collecting money under direct threat of violence for passage through water it does not legally own. That is the definition of maritime piracy, and tribute is simply the polite diplomatic word for the same exact transaction. The United States Navy was literally created in 1794, specifically to fight this identical business model in the Mediterranean. The Barbary states modern Libya, Tunisia, Algeria were doing precisely what Iran is doing right now back in 1800. They demanded payment from ships near their coast, attacked those that refused, and held sailors hostage as completely routine commerce. America's response was the First Barbary War and the motto that emerged millions for defense. Not 1 cent for tribute. The Barbary pirates collected gold coins, which at least had the honesty of being a visible and physical transaction between parties. Iran is collecting untraceable cryptocurrency from vessels on international waters under threat of drone and missile attack in 2026. Same crime. Significant technology upgrade. And somehow the upgraded version is being discussed as a matter of diplomatic nuance. Iran also studied Russia, which used deliberate inspection delays to strangle Ukrainian grain exports through the Black Sea in 2022. The Iranian system is more refined Bitcoin invoices, IRGC escorts, cargo documentation requirements, and a published rate of $1 per barrel. This was not improvised in a crisis. This is pre-built monetization infrastructure for a choke point they plan to control long term. You might ask if the ceasefire was announced. Why are shipping companies not simply moving their vessels through right now? Lloyd's List, the definitive trade publication of the global shipping industry, reported the actual answer with unusual directness this week. Security officials warned that moving before new protocols are fully clarified exposes crews, cargo, and hulls to extreme unpredictable risk. Ships with diplomatic agreements still require Iranian vetting, and every other vessel must complete the toll payment process to proceed. Operators are reporting genuine confusion about who pays the toll: the ship owner, the charterer, or the cargo recipient. European governments are formally requesting clarity, while Iran publicly warns that unauthorized transit will result in direct military action against vessels. BIMCO. One of the world's largest shipping associations, confirmed ships may leave without loading any cargo just to escape the Gulf. These are not cowardly decisions. They are rational responses to armed extortion operating with full legal impunity in real time. And here is the part that matters most for your wallet. Those ships were scheduled to arrive weeks ago and did not. April 8th is exactly when delayed tankers should have been pulling into ports across Europe, Asia, and North and South America. Now let us go directly to the data, because data does not have a press secretary and cannot spin what it shows. Normal operating day in the Strait of Hormuz, 138 ships carrying roughly 20% of the entire world's daily oil supply. April 5th, after the ceasefire announcement, 8 ships total for the entire 24-hour period, a 94% collapse. April 6th improved slightly to 10 ships, still a 93% reduction from the baseline required to keep global markets stable. That means 128 ships per day are sitting motionless that should be moving, each carrying roughly 100,000 tons of essential cargo. The live marine traffic map shows only a handful of vessels moving, and most of those originate from Iranian ports themselves. Iran is loading its own tankers at Karg Island and sailing them out through the strait entirely for its own commercial benefit. Those tankers are then pre-positioned in the Gulf of Oman, staged and ready to deliver oil to Iran's paying customers. Iran is extracting full economic value from its own exports, while every other nation's ships sit anchored and wait indefinitely. That is not a ceasefire, that is a controlled economic siege with a diplomatic press release layered carefully over the top. Some vessels are running dark on AIS, meaning they have switched off their transponders and are moving without any public visibility. AIS spoofing has actually decreased, suggesting the situation has evolved from chaotic conflict into deliberate, organized, and profitable control. The Joint Maritime Information Center confirmed it barely double digits per day against a functional baseline of 138 ships. The ceasefire did not open the strait. It gave Iran the political cover to formalize their control architecture undisturbed. Here's a fact that should make this situation feel even more outrageous than it already does to anyone paying attention. Under international maritime law, Iran has absolutely zero legal authority to charge tolls, require escorts, or restrict transit through Hormuz. The UN Convention on the Law of the Sea states explicitly that transit passage rights cannot be suspended by any bordering state. A significant portion of the strait actually runs through Omani territorial waters, which makes Iran's legal position even more indefensible. Iran is enforcing an illegal toll on water it does not own. Using military threats, it is prohibited from deploying this way. And here is why every American household should be paying close attention, not just maritime professionals following the shipping news. If the world accepts Iran controlling Hormuz by threatening ships, the most dangerous maritime precedent in modern history gets quietly established. What stops Malaysia from charging tolls on the Strait of Malacca, which handles 40% of all global seaborne trade? What stops Morocco and Spain from taxing every vessel entering the Mediterranean through Gibraltar, the gateway to European commercial shipping? What stops Cuba from charging passage fees on ships in the Florida Channel right outside Miami using this exact same logic? This is not a hypothetical scenario. It is the direct and logical consequence of allowing choke point extortion to succeed once. Hugo Grotius established in 1609 that no nation may tax or restrict free passage on international waters for any reason. 400 years of that foundational principle could quietly unravel in the next few weeks based on what happens here. Iran has not closed the strait, they choked it, monetized it, and rebranded the extortion as a routine security inspection. We are watching the world's seas slowly fracture into controlled toll zones and free zones, and it is accelerating visibly. The dark fleet of shadow tankers operating outside tracking systems was the first visible signal that this fracturing was already underway. Iran controlling Hormuz through Bitcoin-denominated military threats is the second and far more serious signal in that same sequence. Every week, this continues without a meaningful international response. The system becomes slightly more normalized and significantly harder to reverse. The Financial Times reported the most troubling detail of this crisis. U.S. military planners simply did not anticipate this outcome. Planners studied a June 2025 Iran operation where Hormuz transits barely dipped and assumed this campaign would behave identically. They projected a short military strike, a brief shipping disruption, and then a rapid return to normal volumes within days. Instead, 20,000 civilian merchant mariners have been stranded inside the Persian Gulf for over 40 days with no clear end date. These are not soldiers or diplomats, they are ordinary sailors, engineers, cooks, and deckhands simply doing jobs for a paycheck. Reports also suggest the administration may accept some form of Iranian toll collection as part of any eventual settlement agreement, if true. That is the largest American retreat from freedom of navigation principles since Congress created the U.S. Navy back in 1794. We would be officially paying tribute to a choke point extortion scheme and calling it a diplomatic compromise in the press releases. If the strait is genuinely open, the United States must prove it through visible action, not through another press conference statement. An LNG carrier running at cryogenic temperatures is a floating bomb no captain sails that without verified military protection guaranteed. Demonstrated, escorted, and publicly visible transits must happen before commercial shipping companies will risk their crews and their vessels again. Britain and the U.S. have begun preliminary talks on joint Hormuz naval escorts, and those preliminary talks must become concrete action now. So here's where we land, and I want to be completely direct about what this particular moment in history represents. Iran built a toll booth on water it does not own. staffed it with the military, and set the prices in Bitcoin. They are collecting tribute from the global shipping industry and officially describing the entire operation as a routine safety inspection. The Barbary pirates ran the exact same operation in the 1800s with swords instead of drones and gold instead of crypto. America went to war specifically to end that behavior and coined the phrase millions for defense, not 1 cent for tribute. We are apparently now in serious diplomatic discussions about how much tribute to pay and in which specific cryptocurrency to send it. Every day this continues. 128 ships sit still, global supply chains absorb the damage, and prices drift higher for everyone. That missing cargo eventually shows up in your gas prices, your grocery bill, and the cost of everything that moves by sea. What this crisis needs is a maritime Heimlich maneuver, dislodge the choke point now before armed extortion becomes the permanent new normal. International escorts, verified transits, and a clear global message that choke point extortion will not be tolerated or accommodated anywhere on Earth. Because if it works in Hormuz, someone will try it in Malacca, then Gibraltar, and eventually at America's own front door. The question that will define the next decade of global trade is not really about Iran specifically, it is far bigger. The real question is whether armed extortion on international waterways becomes a permanently accepted feature of how global commerce operates. 20,000 people are still sitting in the Persian Gulf right now, and nobody has given them a clear answer yet. The next 72 hours of negotiations will determine whether this choke point opens or calcifies into a permanent Iranian revenue stream. Watch the marine traffic data, not the press conferences. That is where the real answer will show up first. If you found this useful, share it. The more people understand what is actually happening here, the better for all of us. Subscribe and turn on notifications because this story is moving fast and the next update could change everything overnight.